How's it going, everyone? Sean Finnegan here. I'm joined by Geoff Robinson. Hey, Geoff, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me in.
No problem. You may recognize Geoff. He goes by iNcontroL. He's the captain of Team EG. He's a pro Starcraft 2 player, and he's here to talk to us a little bit about Legacy of the Void, which is Starcraft 2's third and final, at least for the time being, installment of the very popular RTS franchise. It's been in closed beta now for about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. You've had some time to get your hands on it, really get in with it. How do you feel? Like, what's your overall first impression?
The short answer is super excited, but being as I am who I am, I'm now going to talk and ramble for 5 minutes probably. I love it. I'm really excited about it. I've been playing StarCraft for 17 years now, which feels really weird to say. I don't think I'm that old, but I am, and I've been playing it that long. And as such, I have really high expectations for it. I need it to be the absolute best RTS, and I need it to be not just the best RTS, but a really darn good game, because that's what I have hopes and that's my expectation for the game. And I think it's going to live up to that. I absolutely do. Closed beta is a weird, you have to kind of take a different spin on it. It's like, if they sold this game right now, I would be furious. I would tear my shirt, I would gnash my teeth, I would cry the saltiest of sodium tears. But because it's closed beta, I know that they're going to take steps to improve upon the imbalances, you know, the map kind of stuff. Very little things in the grand scheme of things, but for a game that, you know, completely rides off of balance and needs to be playable, it's a big deal. So I'm really excited. It's really fun. It's very fast paced. It has a ways to go, but we're just in closed beta, so that's fine.
Totally. So speaking about some of those changes, Blizzard has kind of implemented a new sort of direction, a new sort of gameplay style that they have billed as being more aggressive, a little bit more action-packed. Tell us a little bit about that.
StarCraft is, and always has been, pretty much considered one of the faster and certainly more difficult games you can play. And of course, there's varying degrees of that. If you're a lowly scrub playing against your next door neighbor, it's still difficult, but we wouldn't consider it to be, you know, pro status or something like that. And then all the way up to the top. In Legacy of the Void, they've changed both the amount of resources you have at your starting location, but with how many harvesters you have, and even the time of the game. So all of these things kind of accumulate into a much faster and really intense experience. And I know, again, that that's going to be really scary to a lot of people. They're going to hear that and be like, I'm bronze and StarCraft was already super scary. And there's other features that we'll talk about in a little bit that I think make that more okay. But even so, I feel like StarCraft does need to be the kind of game that can reward the top end and make it a more enjoyable viewing experience for everybody else, while still being a fun game to play. And I think through single player and through some of these kind of fun, flashy new units, I think the noob's going to have as much fun as the pro.
Totally. One of the things they said was, like, with this more aggressive play style, they want to make important decisions earlier. So like you mentioned, more starting harvesters and less resources in your base, which encourages faster expansions. Yeah. Tell us about how that's different than Heart of the Swarm, and like maybe how that changes your play style as a pro.
Yeah, you know, it can get as complicated as you want, basically. Because the bases mine out so darn fast, a lot of times a player will open up with a strategy in mind. They're like, I want to do this kind of two-base blink stalker timing attack. And if it works, great, I win the game, or I cripple them and then I can win the game later. Or if it doesn't work, fine, I still have these fairly useful, quite a lot of utility with these stalkers. That's okay. But in Legacy of the Void, if that strategy doesn't work and you've invested a lot of resources into it, you all of a sudden are in a tough spot. Your base is mined out inside your main, your naturals is actually getting kind of thinned, the resources you're bringing in overall is not nearly as much, and all of a sudden you're starting to feel kind of the claustrophobia of the economy of the game. So it doesn't mean you have to do, you know, economic builds and take third and fourth bases super fast, but it does mean that there's a little bit more risk to doing that two-base strategy attack, which I really like, because in Heart of the Swarm and some of the other games, it felt a little bit less punishing. You could just kind of be like, I'm going to try this crazy all-in. If it doesn't work, I can follow it up with another crazy all-in, and then a third all-in, and a fourth all-in, and it just kind of kept going.
Right, which makes it not really an all-in, right?
It's not an all-in as much, but also it made the game, I mean, there was certainly, again, at the higher levels, you could see, if someone failed an all-in, they're pretty screwed. But it just, this makes it just that much more important, and it makes it cooler too, because now there's going to be pressure and aggressive builds that have expansions built into them because they have to.
Right.
And the opponent will be doing similar things as well.
Very cool. One of the also new features that kind of helps bridge this gap between the really high skilled level players and the lower level players is Archon Mode, something brand new to Legacy of the Void. This is a mode where 2 players control a single base. in what used to be a 1v1 experience. As someone who trains people as part of your career and kind of provides guidance and training to younger players and aspiring players, does this change everything? Like, how do you like this? Is it really cool?
This is game breaking. A friend of mine, Total Biscuit, talked a lot about this and said that for him, this was, he called it, I think, the silver bullet or something like that. Some very grandiose statement about how this revolutionizes the game for him. I think when you're sharing responsibility of an army in the race in a game, you also you're more lax in the sense that, like, if you lose, it's not all on your shoulders. That's something I've talked to a lot of people about. When you get your butt kicked in StarCraft, you're like almost personally taken aback. You're like, holy cow, this guy's all over me. But in Archon mode, it's a little bit more, you should have microed that better, and, you know, well, if you would have given me more resources, we could have. And it can be fun, but it can be shared. And that's just the responsibility element. I really like the idea of it as a learning tool, too. If a lesser player plays with a player that's perhaps spent more time in the game, they can be like, okay, well, here's a cool trick you can do with this unit here, let me show you.
Sure.
And then they're like, now you go off and do it yourself. And that kind of hands-on ability to learn a game is unprecedented, and it's really cool in StarCraft because there's so much learning to be had. And again, that's part of the intimidation factor of the game. I feel like a lot of people look at StarCraft, they play it for a second, and they're like, oh, no.
Too much for
No,
me,
that's too much. But in Archon mode, you can have that friend who you're like, you know, I know Joanne has played this game for hundreds of hours all throughout Heart of the Swarm. I'm going to play with her, and she's going to teach me StarCraft 2. And then in that, they might find enjoyment in the game. And I think that option, that ability, is incredible. Never mind the fact that even just outside of the utility of the game, I like the idea that it's just another way for people to play in a relaxed StarCraft atmosphere, a little bit more relaxed, going back on that point, because again, StarCraft is super intense, and there's a lot of people that are picking these other games right now that are like, okay, I just got home from work, I just got home from the gym, I don't want someone yelling at me and me to feel bad about myself, so I'm going to play this other game. Well, now in StarCraft 2, you can be like, hey, let's play some Archon mode and throw back a couple of beers and have a good time.
Awesome. There's a bunch of new units, which we probably won't be able to go over in detail, but we have, you know, sort of what I would call fan favorites from past StarCrafts. We have the Lurker returning for Zerg, and we have this brand new unit for the Protoss called the Adept and the Disruptor. Of all these sort of new units, which we'll probably talk about in a different video at length, which of them is your favorite? Do you have one that you think is pretty cool that you'd like to use, or that it presents something different to your race or a different race?
Right now, I guess I would have to tell you that the Disruptor is my favorite unit. It's one of those love-hate things. It's coming in, and it's kicking the Colossus a little bit to the side, one of my previous favorite units. But it's so cool in that it's very high gas cost. It's 300 gas. It's difficult to build. It takes a robotics bay. It's kind of far down the tech tree. But in conjunction with the new shuttle, which has a bigger pickup and drop-off range, it is supremely powerful. It also has a really cool ability in that it becomes kind of invincible for 4 seconds. Actually, it is invincible for 4 seconds. And then at the end of that cooldown, it blows up and does devastating power. But it's not so one-dimensional where it's like, I, the Protoss player, am doing this to you and there's nothing you can do about it. It's got a radius, it's got that 4-second cooldown. Before and after it's vulnerable to attack. So there's micro involved, there's strategy involved. If you can separate your units and kite away from the AoE, it's going to do less damage. It's super expensive, so if it doesn't do a lot of damage, then you're actually wasting money despite winning. And I find it to be, like, all these little elements in a unit is so hugely more interesting to me than just this tall robot thing shoot lasers. And yeah,
so there's a balance element to it.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you very much for talking us through this, Geoff. Like I said before, Geoff's the captain of Team EG, the pro StarCraft player. You can check him out on Twitter. But for everything else, StarCraft and Legacy of the Void, you're already in the right place, right here on IGN.